I destroyed a $20 million dynasty and left a child fatherless just because I refused to lie about a simple biology chart. My name is Joy Miller, and I am the tutor who accidentally exposed a decade of deceit with one scientific fact. Parents with type O blood cannot produce a child with type A. I did not know I was lighting a fuse that would blow the Vance family apart. Brenda Vance, the mother of my student, was not just a wealthy socialite. She was a desperate manipulator who tried to bribe me with $50,000 to cover up her affair. When I refused to take her hush money, she tried to ruin my life, painting me as a homewrecker to hide the fact that her husband had been raising another man's son for 10 years. Now, she is behind bars, and I am safe with a massive settlement check. But I cannot stop seeing the empty look in that little boy's eyes as he was dragged away by social services because the man he loved refused to keep him. I won the battle for the truth, but I feel like I have lost my soul in the process. Please tell me, is the truth really worth it when it destroys an innocent child's entire world? My name is Joy Miller. I am 27 years old, and until recently, I was a ghost, not the kind that haunts old attics, but the kind you walk past in the grocery store without a second glance. I have no husband, no children, and my only family consists of a mother in a nursing home in Ohio who barely remembers my face. I live, or rather, I used to live, in a cramped, drafty studio apartment in the shadow of Seattle's gleaming skyline, surrounded by the constant hum of traffic and the smell of damp concrete. I am a private tutor by trade, a biologist by education, and a woman drowning in $120,000 of student loan debt by circumstance. Right now, I am sitting in a motel room 3 states away, watching the neon sign outside flicker against the rain-streaked window. My hands are shaking. It is not from the cold. It is from the realization that my life, as pathetic as it was, has been incinerated, and the match that started the fire was not an act of malice, but a simple, scientific fact. It started on a Tuesday in November, a gray, unremarkable Tuesday that smelled of wet leaves and exhaust fumes. I drove my rusted sedan up the winding driveway of the Vance estate. The car rattled and wheezed as it climbed the hill, a stark, embarrassing contrast to the silent, pristine electric vehicles parked in the driveways of the neighbors. This was the Highlands, a gated community where the lawns were manicured with surgical precision and the security cameras outnumbered the trees. I parked my car around the corner, out of sight, just as Mistress Vance, Brenda, had subtly suggested during my interview. She had smiled when she said it, claiming the driveway was being power washed. But we both knew the truth. My poverty was an eyesore. I walked up the stone path, smoothing out my thrift store blazer. I took a deep breath, putting on my professional mask. Inside, I was calculating how many hours I needed to work this week just to pay the minimum balance on my credit card. Outside, I was Miss Miller, the patient, a knowledgeable tutor. The house was magnificent and oppressive. It was a sprawling modern fortress of glass and steel, overlooking the lake. When the housekeeper let me in, the silence hit me first. It was that heavy, expensive silence you only find in homes where the walls are thick enough to keep out the world. I went straight to the study where Kyle was waiting. Kyle Vance was 10 years old, a small boy with pale skin and eyes that always seemed a little too big for his face. He was a sweet kid, intelligent but easily distracted, living in a world of expectations he did not quite understand. "Good afternoon, Kyle," I said, setting my bag down on the mahogany table that probably cost more than my entire education. Today, we are continuing with genetics. Did you finish the worksheet on dominant and recessive traits? Kyle nodded, pushing a piece of paper toward me. He looked proud. I scanned the work. It was decent. He understood the basics of eye color inheritance. Good job, I said, offering a tight smile. I was tired. My head was pounding from a lack of caffeine, and I just wanted to get through the hour so I could go home and eat instant noodles. Now, let us move on to blood types. This is where it gets interesting. It is like a biological puzzle. I drew a Punnett square on the whiteboard. I loved this part of biology. It was clean. It was logical. There was no gray area, no emotion, just cold, hard rules. If you have a parent with type A and a parent with type B, you can have a child with any blood type, but there are rules that cannot be broken. Kyle watched me with intensity. He was chewing on the end of his pencil, a nervous habit his mother hated. Miss Miller, Kyle interrupted, his voice quiet. We did this in school today. Actually, we had to ask our parents their blood types for a project. Oh, I capped the marker, leaning back against the heavy oak desk. That is great. It makes my job easier. So, what are the data points? Kyle looked down at his notebook. Well, my dad said he is type O, and my mom said she is type O too. I nodded, my brain already filling in the rest of the grid. Okay, that is the simplest combination. Type O is recessive. If both parents are O, they only have recessive genes to give. Kyle frowned. He looked at the chart I had drawn, then back at his notebook. But Xiao Yu Jing Haoling, 2# is greater than I am, type A. The room went very still. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked loudly, a slow, rhythmic heartbeat that seemed to mock the sudden tension. I laughed. It was a short, dry sound. I did not mean to be cruel. I was just reacting to the scientific absurdity of his statement. It was a reflex. My social skills have always been my weak point. I tend to value accuracy over empathy. I shook my head, picking up the marker again. No, Kyle, that is impossible. You must have heard them wrong. Or maybe you wrote it down incorrectly. If both your parents are type O, you have to be type O. It is a biological law. It is like saying 2 blue-eyed parents gave birth to a brown-eyed child. It does not happen. Kyle's face flushed pink. He looked defensive, his small hands gripping the edge of the table. No, I am sure. I saw my medical card in the file cabinet when Mom was looking for my vaccination records. It said type A, and Dad is definitely O. He gives blood all the time. He has a mug that says universal donor. I see him, feeling a flicker of irritation. I hate it when students argue with facts. I looked at him, my eyes narrowing, slightly behind my glasses. Listen to me, Kyle. Biology does not lie. People make mistakes. Paperwork has typos, but DNA is DNA. I should have stopped there. I should have changed the subject. I should have realized that I was a servant in this house, a hired hand who should keep her mouth shut. But the scientist in me, the arrogant intellectual who resented these wealthy people for having everything while knowing nothing, could not let it go. I wanted to be right. I needed to be right. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, unaware that I was lighting the fuse on a bomb that would blow us all to pieces. Kyle, look at the board. O plus O equals O. Always, if you are really type A, then Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2# is greater. Then I paused, searching for a logical explanation, and the words tumbled out before I could filter them. Then either the hospital switched babies at birth, or 小井号令, 2# is greater than well. You are adopted. It was a joke, a dark, sarcastic, inappropriate joke, the kind of thing I would say to a peer in a university lab. But Kyle was 10, his eyes filled with sudden, sharp tears. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. I am not adopted. You are lying. He looked at me with a mixture of betrayal and horror. I felt a twinge of guilt, but it was quickly buried under my own defensiveness. I was the teacher. I was the one with the degree. Why was he getting so upset over a biology lesson? Kyle, sit down, I said, my voice stern. I am not saying you are adopted. I am saying that scientifically, your data is flawed. You need to go check your sources again. Go ask your mother. Ask her to explain the discrepancy. Maybe she just forgot her blood type. I was so confident, so smug. I thought I was teaching him critical thinking. I thought I was encouraging him to question the world and seek evidence. Kyle stared at me for one long second, his chest heaving. Then, without another word, he turned and ran out of the room. I heard his footsteps pounding up the stairs, followed by the slam of a door. I stood there alone in the silent study. I looked at the whiteboard. The Punnett square stared back at me, accusingly perfect. O plus O equals O. I shrugged, erased the board, and started packing my bag. I assumed he was just having a tantrum. Rich kids, I thought to myself, they cannot handle being wrong. I checked the time. My hour was up. I left the worksheet on the table, feeling a sense of intellectual superiority. I had done my job. I had taught the truth. As I walked out to my car, the rain had started to fall harder. I sat in the driver's seat of my beat-up sedan, listening to the engine struggle to turn over. I thought about the $40 I had just earned. It was barely enough to cover gas and groceries for 2 days. I felt a surge of bitterness toward the Vance family. With their heated floors and their perfect genetics, I did not know then that Kyle was currently marching into his mother's bedroom, tears streaming down his face, demanding to know why his teacher said he was adopted. I did not know that Brenda Vance was currently sipping a glass of Chardonnay, completely unaware that her carefully constructed web of lies was about to be torn apart by a 4th grade science lesson. I put the car in gear and drove away, thinking about what I would have for dinner. I thought the drama was over. I thought it was just another day. I had no idea that I had just signed my own death warrant. 2 days passed. The silence from the Vance estate was heavy, but I interpreted it as a good sign. I assumed they were embarrassed. I imagined Robert and Brenda Vance sitting their son down, explaining the mix-up with the paperwork, perhaps laughing about it over a dinner that cost more than my monthly rent. I went about my life, which consisted mostly of grading papers for other clients and staring at the ceiling of my apartment, calculating how long I could survive on rice and beans. My apartment building was a decaying brick box in a neighborhood that gentrification had forgotten. The hallway always smelled of boiled cabbage and stale cigarette smoke. The carpet was a shade of brown that suggested it had given up on life decades ago. It was the kind of place where people kept their heads down and their doors double-locked. On Thursday evening, the rain was lashing against the window pane with a rhythmic violence. I was sitting on my second-hand sofa, wrapped in a blanket, trying to ignore the draft seeping in through the cracks in the frame. I had a bowl of instant noodles in my hand. the steam rising up to fog my glasses. Then came the knock. It was not a tentative, neighborly rap. It was a sharp, authoritative pounding. 3 distinct strikes. Hard, demanding. I froze, my spoon hovering halfway to my mouth. I was not expecting anyone. My landlord usually slid eviction warnings under the door. I set the bowl down on the coffee table and walked to the door, my heart doing a nervous little flutter. I peered through the peephole. The image was distorted by the fisheye lens, but the figure was unmistakable. It was Brenda Vance. She stood there in the dim, flickering light of the hallway, looking like a diamond dropped in the mud. She was wearing a beige trench coat that was immaculately belted at the waist, and her blonde hair was coiffed into a perfect, sleek bob that defied the humidity. She looked out of place, alien, and terrifyingly composed. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door just a crack. The smell of her perfume, something floral and expensive, like crushed lilies and money, immediately overpowered the smell of cabbage in the hall. "Mistress Vance?" I asked, my voice betraying my confusion. She did not wait for an invitation. She placed a hand on the door, her manicured nails digging into the peeling paint, and pushed. It was a subtle movement, but it carried the weight of someone who has never been told no. I stumbled back, allowing her to enter. She stepped inside and surveyed my apartment. Her blue eyes swept over the water stains on the ceiling, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter, and the half-eaten noodles. She did not say a word, but her lip curled slightly. It was a look of profound, polite disgust. "I am sorry to intrude." "Joy," she said. Her voice was smooth, devoid of warmth. "But you were not answering your phone." I checked my phone on the table. It had been on silent. "I have been busy." I lied. I pulled my cardigan tighter around myself, suddenly acutely aware of my worn-out leggings and oversized t-shirt. "Is everything okay with Kyle?" Brenda turned to face me. She removed her leather gloves slowly, finger by finger, like a surgeon preparing for an operation. "No, everything is not okay. Kyle has not slept in 2 nights. He has been hysterical. He refuses to eat." I felt a pang of guilt, but I pushed it down. "I am sorry to hear that, Mistress Vance, but I am not sure what that has to do with me." She took a step closer. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You told my son he was adopted," she said. It was not a question. It was an accusation. I stiffened. My defensive instincts flared. I did not tell him he was adopted. I told him that based on the blood types he provided, it was a biological impossibility for him to be your child. I was teaching him how to interpret data. Brenda let out a short, incredulous laugh. She walked over to my small bookshelf, running a finger along the spine of a biology textbook. "He is 10 years old. Joy, he is a child. He does not need data. He needs security. You put ideas in his head. Dangerous, toxic ideas. You told him the hospital made a mistake. You told him we lied to him." I crossed my arms over my chest. I was the expert here. She was just a wealthy housewife who probably had not opened a science book since high school. "Mistress Vance," I said, trying to keep my voice steady and professional. "I understand you are upset, but facts are facts. If you and Mr. Vance are both type O, you cannot produce a type A child. It is genetics. It is not an opinion. If the data Kyle gave me is correct, then there is an anomaly." I was simply pointing out that anomaly. Brenda spun around, her eyes flashing with sudden, cold rage. "There is no anomaly," she snapped, Her composure cracked for a split second, revealing a frantic desperation underneath. Science has exceptions. There are mutations. There are rare cases. You should have told him that. I shook my head. I could not help myself. The arrogance of her statement, the way she tried to bend reality to fit her narrative, ignited my intellectual pride. Actually, there are no exceptions in the ABO blood group system for this specific combination, I said, my voice rising slightly, unless you are talking about the Bombay phenotype, which is statistically non-existent in this population. I cannot lie to a student about fundamental biology just to make him feel better. That goes against my ethics as an educator. I walked over to the bookshelf and pulled out the very book she had touched. I flipped it open to the chapter on heredity. Look, I said, holding it out to her. It is right here. Punnett squares. Mendelian inheritance. It is not personal. Mistress Vance, it is just the truth. Brenda did not look at the book. She looked at me. Her gaze was measuring, calculating. She saw the poverty. She saw the desperation in the way I held the book like a shield. She realized that arguing facts was useless. So she switched tactics. She went for the throat. You think you are so smart, do you not? She said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You think because you have a degree and a stack of books, you understand how the world works, but you do not know anything. Joy, you are a tutor. You are hired help. You are a service we pay for, like the pool boy or the gardener. Her words stung, tearing through my thin armor of intellectual superiority. I am an educator, I stammered, my face burning. You are a liability, she corrected. Listen to me very carefully. You are going to fix this. You are going to come to my house tomorrow. You are going to sit Kyle down, and you are going to tell him that you made a mistake. You are going to tell him that you were confused, that you looked at the wrong chart, and that type O parents have type A children all the time. I stared at her, stunned. You want me to lie? You want me to teach him false information? I want you to undo the damage you caused, she hissed. If you do not, I will destroy you. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. What do you mean? I asked, my throat dry. Brenda smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. I am the head of the Parents Association at St. Jude's. I am on the board of the Homeowners Association. I know every wealthy family in this city who hires private tutors. If you do not do exactly as I say, I will make sure you never work in this town again. I will file a complaint with the Child Protective Services claiming you emotionally abused my son. I will sue you for infliction of emotional distress. I will bury you in so many legal fees that you will be paying them off for the rest of your miserable life. My heart hammered against my ribs. I knew she could do it. She had the money. She had the power. I was just Joy Miller, the girl with the student loans and the rust bucket car. But as I looked at her, standing there in my living room, demanding that I bend the knee, something inside me snapped. It was a mixture of fear and a stubborn, reckless pride. I hated her. I hated her entitlement. I hated the way she thought her money could rewrite the laws of nature. I closed the textbook with a loud thud. Get out, I said. Brenda blinked, surprised. Excuse me, I said, get out of my apartment. I repeated, my voice shaking. I am not going to lie to Kyle, and if you threaten me again, I will call the police. Brenda stared at me for a long moment. The surprise on her face slowly morphed into a look of pure venom. She adjusted her coat, smoothing out a non-existent wrinkle. You are making a very big mistake. Joy, she said softly. You have no idea who you are dealing with. I slammed the door and locked it, my fingers fumbling with the deadbolt. The click of the metal sliding into place echoed in the sudden silence of my apartment, but it offered no real sense of security. I leaned my forehead against the peeling paint of the doorframe, my breath coming in short, shallow gasps. My heart was hammering, a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a physical manifestation of the adrenaline that was flooding my system. I had just thrown Brenda Vance out of my home. For a brief, intoxicating moment, I felt a surge of triumph. I had stood my ground. I had refused to bow down to her wealth and her arrogance. I had defended the truth. But as the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by the creeping cold of the drafty room, the reality of my situation began to sink in. I was a tutor living paycheck to paycheck, drowning in student loans, dependent on the goodwill of the wealthy elite for my survival, and I had just declared war on the queen bee. I did not know it then, but while I was pacing the worn carpet of my living room, trying to convince myself that I had done the right thing, the gears of my destruction were already turning across town, and surprisingly, the first cog to move was not Brenda, it was Robert. Robert Vance was a man who built his fortune on hostile takeovers and high-stakes negotiations. He was not a man who dealt in emotions. He dealt in leverage. He knew the smell of desperation, and that night, his house reeked of it. From what I later pieced together through court documents and whispered confessions, Robert had returned home shortly after Brenda left my apartment. He found his wife in the kitchen, not crying, but furiously cleaning a countertop that was already spotless. She was manic. She was pouring herself a glass of wine with a hand that shook so violently the liquid splashed onto the marble. She started ranting the moment he walked in. She told him that I was incompetent. She told him that I was unstable. She told him that she was going to sue me, destroy me, and make sure I never taught a child in this state again. She was talking too much. Robert stood in the doorway, loosening his silk tie, watching her. He was a predator, observing prey that did not yet know it was caught. In his world, when someone reacted with that level of nuclear force to a minor infraction, it was never about the infraction. It was about what lay beneath it. Why are you so angry, Brenda? He had asked, his voice deceptively calm. It was just a biology lesson. The boy is confused. We correct him. We move on. Why the lawsuit? Why the threats? Brenda had spun around, her eyes wild, because she heard him. Robert, she told him, he does not belong to us. We have to protect our son. Robert did not say anything. He just took a sip of water and watched her pupils dilate. He saw the terror behind the rage. And in that moment, the seed of doubt that had been planted by my biology lesson, the seed I had carelessly tossed into the soil, began to take root. He waited until the house was asleep at 2 o'clock in the morning, while Brenda was passed out from a combination of exhaustion and Chardonnay. Robert walked silently down the hallway to Kyle's bedroom. He pushed the door open. The room was illuminated by the soft glow of a nightlight shaped like a rocket ship. Kyle was asleep, his small chest rising and falling in a rhythm of innocent oblivion. Robert stood over the bed for a long time. He looked at the boy's face. He looked for his own chin, his own nose, his own hairline. He tried to see the reflection of himself that he had always assumed was there. But in the dim light, doubt warped his vision. Did the boy really look like him? Or had he just seen what he wanted to see for 10 years? He moved to the bathroom attached to Kyle's room. He opened the drawer and took out a hairbrush. It was full of fine, brown strands. He pulled a handful of hair from the bristles, making sure the follicles were attached. Then, he took the toothbrush from the holder. He placed both items into a plastic sandwich bag he had brought from the kitchen. He did not feel like a father in that moment. He felt like an auditor. He was checking the books. He was verifying the assets. The next morning, Robert did not go to his office. Instead, he drove to a private diagnostic laboratory downtown, a place that specialized in discretion and expedited results for high net worth individuals. He paid $3,000 for a rush paternity test. He wanted the truth, and he was willing to pay to get it fast. Meanwhile, my world was beginning to collapse with terrifying speed. It started on Monday morning. I was preparing for a session with the Henderson twins, 2 high school sophomores I had been tutoring in chemistry for 6 months. I was packing my bag, checking my notes, feeling a little less anxious than I had over the weekend. Maybe Brenda was bluffing. I told myself maybe she had cooled down. My phone rang. The screen displayed Mistress Henderson's name. "Good morning, Mistress Henderson." I answered cheerfully. "I am just heading out the door. I should be there in..." "Joy." Her voice cut me off. It was icy. It lacked the usual warmth, the usual chatty tone about her garden or the weather. "Do not bother coming over." I froze, my hand gripping the doorknob. "Excuse me? We are terminating your services. Effective immediately," she said. My stomach dropped. "Is Sao Jing Halin 2 hash is greater than is there a problem? Did the boys fail a test? We do not think you are the right fit for our family anymore," she said, reciting a rehearsed line. "We have heard some concerning things, Joy, about your judgment, about the topics you discuss with young children." My breath hitched. "Who told you that? Did Brenda Vance call you?" There was a pause on the other end, a pause that confirmed everything. "We just think it is best if we part ways," Mistress Henderson said. "Please do not contact us again." The line went dead. I stood there in my hallway, the silence pressing in on my ears. Before I could process what had happened, my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from the Clarks, a family I tutored on Wednesdays. Subject: cancellation of tutoring services. "Dear Miss Miller, due to unforeseen changes in our schedule, we will no longer require your assistance with Sarah's biology coursework. We wish you the best." I sat down on the floor, right there in the entryway. My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Brenda was not bluffing. She was systematically dismantling my livelihood. I logged onto the local community Facebook page, a group I usually avoided because it was filled with complaints about garbage collection and suspicious vans. I searched my name. There it was, a post from an anonymous user, but the writing style was unmistakable. "Warning to all parents in the Highlands area. Be very careful with the tutors you hire. There is a certain biology tutor working in our neighborhood who has been spreading harmful, anti-family propaganda to young children. She is emotionally unstable and has been known to aggressively challenge parental authority. Protect your kids from toxic influences." The comments section was a bloodbath. Oh my God, is this the girl with the old Toyota? I always thought she looked sketchy. "Thank you for the warning. We were about to hire a science tutor. We'll definitely do a background check now. Someone should report her to the school board." I felt like I was suffocating. I scrolled through the comments, my vision blurring with tears of rage and panic. They did not even know me. They did not know that I stayed up late making custom lesson plans. They did not know that I bought stickers and candy out of my own pocket to motivate their spoiled children. They just saw a threat to their perfect bubble-wrapped world, and they were eager to destroy it. I checked my bank account balance. $342. My rent was due in 4 days. It was $1,200. My student loan payment was due in a week. $400. My car insurance. My electricity bill. My grocery budget. The numbers swirled in my head, forming a noose. I was not just losing a job. I was losing my ability to exist. I was watching my life evaporate because I had dared to tell a 10-year-old boy that type O plus type O equals type O. I spent the next 2 days in a fugue state. I applied for jobs at grocery stores, coffee shops, warehouses, anything that would pay immediately, but even those applications felt futile. I was overqualified and desperate, a combination that employers can smell from a mile away. On Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang again. I stared at it, terrified to answer. I expected another cancellation, another insult, another nail in my coffin, but the number was blocked. I picked it up, my voice trembling. "Hello? Is this Joy Miller?" The voice was male, deep, and clipped. It sounded professional, but there was an edge to it. "Yes," I whispered. "This is the office of Dr. Alistair Thorne. We are calling on behalf of a client who wishes to remain anonymous. But given the circumstances, I believe you know who he is. Mr. Vance requested that we contact you." My heart stopped. "Mr. Vance? Robert?" "Yes." The voice continued. "Mr. Vance has received some saluting howling. 2# is greater than interesting laboratory results regarding a paternity test. He believes you might be the only person who can provide context to the situation. He would like to meet." I gripped the phone tighter. "Meet? Why?" "Because, Miss Miller," the man on the other end said, his voice dropping an octave. "It appears that your biology lesson was more accurate than anyone in that household wanted to admit. Mr. Vance is currently staying at the Four Seasons downtown. He has been removed from his home. Or rather, he has removed himself. He wants to know exactly what you told his son." I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. The relief was instant, followed immediately by a wave of cold dread. "So I was right?" I asked, my voice barely audible. The silence on the other end was heavy. "Mr. Vance is not the father. Miss Miller, the boy shares 0 genetic markers with him. You were right. And because you were right, you have made a very powerful enemy in Mistress Vance. But you may have just found a very complicated ally in Mr. Vance." I hung up the phone and stared at the wall. The vindication did not taste sweet. It tasted like ash. I had proven my point. I had defended science. But at what cost? A family was shattered. A boy was fatherless, and I was standing in the middle of the wreckage. Holding the sledgehammer, I looked at the empty instant noodle cup on my coffee table. I realized then that the war was not over. It had simply changed battlefields. Brenda Vance had tried to starve me out, to silence me with poverty and reputation, destruction. But now, Robert Vance knew the truth, and the truth was about to become a weapon that would destroy us all. The text message from the bank arrived at 6 o'clock in the evening. It was a low balance alert. I had $12.14 to my name. It was the kind of notification that makes your stomach turn over. A cold reminder that while the wealthy play games with paternity tests and lawyers, the rest of us are just trying to keep the lights on. I decided to drive to the Vance estate. It was a foolish, reckless decision born of pure desperation. I told myself I was going there to demand the wages I was owed for the last 2 sessions. $80. It was a pitiful sum to them, barely the cost of a bottle of wine. But to me, it was a week of groceries. I needed that money. The storm had turned the sky a bruised shade of purple as I drove up the winding roads of the Highlands. The rain was coming down in sheets, blurring the windshield faster than my wipers could clear it. When I turned the corner toward the Vance property, I saw the flashing lights. It was not police cars, but the amber hazard lights of a private security vehicle blocking the massive iron gates. I slowed my car to a crawl, peering through the deluge. The front door of the mansion was wide open. I could see silhouettes moving frantically against the golden light of the foyer. Then I saw luggage flying, not carried, but thrown. A Louis Vuitton suitcase tumbled down the wet stone steps, bursting open and spilling silk clothes onto the muddy driveway. I rolled down my window, the cold rain stinging my face. I could hear shouting over the roar of the wind. "Get out!" Robert Vance's voice was a guttural roar, unrecognizable from the composed businessman I had met only once before. "Get out of my house." Then I saw Brenda. She was stumbling down the steps, clutching a fur coat around her shoulders, her hair plastered to her skull. She was screaming something unintelligible, grabbing at Robert's arm. He shoved her away with a force that made me flinch. He did not hit her, but the disgust in the motion was violent enough. And then there was Kyle. The boy was standing by the open trunk of a black SUV, holding a backpack, looking small and terrified. He was not crying. He was frozen. He looked like a statue of a child, watching his entire universe detonate because his tutor had taught him how to draw a Punnett square. I rolled my window up and slumped down in my seat, heart hammering. I put the car in reverse, my hands shaking on the wheel. I could not go up there. I could not ask for my $80 while a family was being eviscerated. I backed the car down the hill, feeling a sickening mixture of guilt and voyeuristic horror. I had lit the match, and now I was watching the house burn. I drove home in a daze. When I got back to my apartment, the silence was deafening. I sat on my couch, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the rain drip from the leak in the ceiling into a bucket. Plink, plink, plink. 2 hours later, there was a knock at the door. It was different from the last time. It was not authoritative. It was frantic. A rapid-fire staccato beat that sounded like a trapped bird beating its wings against a cage. I knew who it was before I opened it. Brenda stood in the hallway. She looked like a ghost of the woman who had threatened me days earlier. Her mascara ran in black, jagged lines down her cheeks. Her expensive coat was soaked through, smelling of wet wool and expensive desperation. She was shivering violently. "Let me in," she whispered. Her voice was cracked, raw from screaming. I hesitated. My instinct was to slam the door. She was dangerous. She was toxic. But curiosity, and perhaps a shred of pity, made me step aside. She stumbled into the room and did not even look around with disdain this time. She walked straight to my kitchen table and collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. "He kicked us out," she sobbed. "He changed the locks. He canceled my credit cards. He told the security guards to shoot if I came back." I stood by the door, arms crossed. "I heard you," I said quietly. "I was there." She looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "You were there?" "I came to get my paycheck." She let out a hysterical, wet laugh. "Your paycheck?" You worried about $80 when I just lost 20 million. She reached into her purse, her hands trembling so much, she dropped a tube of lipstick on the floor. She pulled out a checkbook. It was wet, the edges curling. She grabbed a pen and started writing furiously. You want money? Joy? Is that what you want? You want to be paid? She ripped the check out and slammed it onto the table. I walked over and looked down. $50,000. The number sat there in blue ink, stark and impossible. $50,000. It was more money than I made in 2 years. It was half my student loan debt. It was a new car. It was a down payment on a house. It was freedom. My mouth went dry. What is this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. This is your consulting fee, Brenda said, her eyes locking onto mine with a terrifying intensity. This is for correcting your mistake. I looked from the check to her face. My mistake? Yes. She leaned forward, grabbing my hand. Her skin was ice cold. You made a mistake. Joy, you were tired. You were confused. You looked at the wrong chart. Or maybe you just wanted to cause drama because you were jealous. It does not matter what the reason is. All that matters is that you fix it. I pulled my hand away. I cannot fix biology. Brenda, the DNA test. Screw the DNA test, she shrieked, slamming her hand on the table. Robert is a proud man. He is embarrassed. If you go to him, if you sign a sworn affidavit stating that you intentionally misled Kyle, that you lied about the blood types to hurt the family, Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2 hashes greater than I can use that. I can tell Robert that you are a sociopath who planted doubts in his head. I can cast doubt on the lab results. I can say you tampered with the sample. I can buy time. She pushed the check toward me. $50,000. Joy, cash, tonight, and another $50,000 when Robert lets us back in. My heart was thumping so loud I could hear it in my ears. $100,000. I looked around my apartment, the peeling paint, the bucket catching rain, the empty refrigerator. All I had to do was lie. All I had to do was destroy my own reputation. I would be known as the crazy tutor, the liar, the unethical teacher, but I would be a rich, unethical teacher. I could move to another state. I could start over. Inner voices screamed at me. One voice, the voice of my father who worked himself to death in a factory, told me to have some dignity. The other voice, the voice of the girl who had eaten ramen for dinner for 3 years straight, told me to take the money and run. I looked at Brenda. She was watching me with the hunger of a wolf. She saw my hesitation. She saw the greed in my eyes. She knew she had me. Just sign a paper, she urged, her voice dropping to a seductive whisper. Just a piece of paper. Who cares about the truth? The truth does not pay your rent. The truth does not keep you warm. I reached out and touched the corner of the check. The paper felt crisp. It felt real. Okay, I said softly. Brenda let out a breath of relief, her shoulders sagging. Thank God. You are a smart girl. Joy, I knew you were smart. I need a moment. I said, I need to find a pen. And Xiao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2 hashes greater than I need a glass of water. I turned my back to her and walked to the kitchenette. My hands were shaking uncontrollably. I opened the drawer where I kept my utensils. I did not just grab a pen. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I swiped the screen with a trembling thumb and opened the voice recorder app. I hit the red button. I slipped the phone back into the pocket of my cardigan. The microphone facing out, I turned back to Brenda, holding a glass of water. I did not take the check. Not yet. I sat down across from her. Tell me again, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, just so I am clear on what I am agreeing to. You want me to sign a legal document stating that I lied about the blood types. Even though we both know Kyle is not Robert's son, you are paying me this $50,000 to help you commit fraud against your husband? Brenda took a sip of water, her confidence returning now that she thought she had bought me. It is not fraud, Joy. It is preserving a family. Yes, I am paying you to retract your statement. I am paying you to say whatever needs to be said to make Robert doubt that test. He loves that boy. He wants to believe Kyle is his. We just need to give him an excuse to believe it. I nodded slowly. And if I do this, Sao Ting Haling, 2 hashes greater than if I lie for you. Sao Ting Haling, 2 hashes greater than you will drop the threats? You will stop bad-mouthing me to the other parents? Brenda smiled. It was a grotesque, smeared makeup smile. Of course, darling, if you help me, we are best friends. I will even write you a recommendation letter. I will say you are the best tutor we ever had. I could feel the phone recording in my pocket. It felt heavy, like a stone. I looked at the check one last time. I thought about the debt. I thought about the cold. I thought about how easy it would be. But then I thought about Kyle. I thought about the way he looked in the driveway, standing in the rain, his life packed into a backpack. If I took this money, I was selling him back to a mother who saw him as nothing more than an insurance policy. I was selling him back to a lie. I am not a saint. I wanted that money. I wanted it so badly, my teeth ached. But I realized something in that moment. If I took it, I would never be free of her. She would own me. I looked up at Brenda. I need to think about it, I said. Brenda's smile faltered. What? It is a big decision, I said, standing up. I need to review the affidavit. I need to sleep on it. Brenda stood up, her eyes narrowing. The rage was coming back. You do not have time to sleep on it. Robert is filing for divorce tomorrow. I need this now. I walked to the door and opened it. The rain was still pounding outside. Leave the check, I said. I will call you in the morning. Brenda glared at me. She wanted to scream. She wanted to slap me. But she was desperate. She had no other cards to play. Do not cross me, Joy, she hissed as she walked past me into the hallway. If you betray me, that check disappears, and I will make sure you end up in prison. She disappeared into the dark stairwell. I slammed the door and locked it. I leaned against the wood, sliding down until I hit the floor. I pulled the phone out of my pocket and hit stop. Saved. I picked up the check from the table. $50,000. I held it in my hands for a long time, staring at the zeros. Then, with a heavy sigh that felt like it tore something inside my chest, I folded it and put it in my wallet. I did not cash it, but I did not tear it up either. I was playing a dangerous game now. I had the evidence of her bribery. I had the truth, but I was still broke. I was still terrified, and I was holding a piece of paper that could solve all my problems if I just sold my soul. The morning sun did not bring clarity. It brought a harsh, unforgiving light that exposed the dust motes dancing in my apartment and the terrifying reality of the check sitting on my kitchen table. $50,000. It was a lifeline. It was salvation. I had spent the night staring at it, imagining the weight lifting off my shoulders. I imagined paying off the student loans that had strangled me since graduation. I imagined buying a car that started on the first try. But beneath the fantasy, a cold knot of fear had tightened in my stomach. I am a biologist, not a criminal mastermind. I understand cause and effect. I knew that signing a false affidavit was perjury. I knew that conspiring to defraud a wealthy man like Robert Vance was a felony. If I took this money, I was not just selling my integrity, I was handing Brenda the leash to my life. Every time I tried to reach for the check, my hand shook. It was not morality stopping me. It was self-preservation. I sat there with my third cup of stale coffee, the caffeine making my heart flutter like a trapped moth. I picked up my phone. I had to end this. I dialed Brenda's number. It rang once, twice. Hello. Joy. Her voice was bright, almost cheerful. It was the voice of a woman who thought she had won. Have you come to your senses? I took a deep breath, gripping the edge of the table until my knuckles turned white. I cannot do it. Brenda. The silence on the other end was instant and absolute. The cheerful veneer vanished. Excuse me? I cannot sign the affidavit, I said, my voice trembling but firm. I cannot lie to the court, and I cannot help you trick your husband. It is illegal. It is fraud. I am sorry, but I am returning the check. I waited for the screaming. I waited for the threats, but Brenda did not scream. She let out a low, disappointed sigh, the kind a mother makes when a child spills milk on a new carpet. Oh, Joy, you really are a foolish girl. I offered you a way out. I offered you a golden parachute. I am not going to jail for you. I said, You think jail is the worst thing that can happen to a person? Brenda asked softly. You have such a limited imagination. You had a choice. You could have been my ally. Now, you are just Xiao Yu Jinghao Ling. 2 hash is greater than collateral damage. The line went dead. I put the phone down, feeling a strange mixture of relief and nausea. I tore the check into 4 pieces, then 8, then 16. I dropped the confetti into the trash can. It was done. I was broke, but I was safe, or so I thought. The attack did not come with a knock on the door or a lawyer's letter. It came through the glowing rectangle in my hand. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Instagram, then another, then 5 more in rapid succession. Within a minute, my phone was vibrating continuously, dancing across the table like a possessed object. I picked it up, frowning. I had 42 new comments on a photo of my cat I had posted 3 years ago. Homewrecker, disgusting. How could you do that to a family? Xiao Yu Jinghao Ling. Tfor Sloot. My blood ran cold. I switched to Facebook. My inbox was flooded with message requests from people I did not know. Strangers, neighbors from the Highlands, friends of the Vances. I found the source quickly. It was a post on the local community page, The Highlands Voice, shared by Brenda Vance. It had over 300 comments and 200 shares. The headline read, The Wolf in Sheep's Clothing, How a Predatory Tutor Destroyed My Family. I read the text, my breath catching in my throat. It was a masterpiece of fiction. Brenda had not just accused me of being incompetent. She had constructed an entirely new narrative. I am writing this with a broken heart. The post began. Many of you know the pain my family is going through. My husband has left us. My son is traumatized. But what you do not know is why. It was not a simple misunderstanding. It was a calculated attack by a woman we invited into our home. Joy Miller was not just tutoring our son. She was seducing my husband. I gasped aloud, dropping the phone onto the table as if it were burning hot. I picked it up again, forcing myself to read. For months, this woman has been having inappropriate relations with Robert in our own home. while I was out running errands. When I began to suspect something, she panicked. She concocted a lie about our son's blood type, a complete fabrication to cast doubt on his paternity. She convinced Robert that our son was not his, creating a reason for him to leave me and be with her without guilt. She destroyed a 10-year-old boy's life just to steal a wealthy man. She is a predator. She is dangerous. And she is currently trying to extort money from us to keep quiet. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The room spun. It was brilliant. It was evil. It explained everything. It explained why I had brought up the blood types. It explained why Robert had kicked them out. It painted Brenda as the victim of a younger, poorer, sexually manipulative woman. It tapped into every insecurity of every wealthy wife in that neighborhood. I was no longer the nerdy science tutor who made a mistake. I was the other woman. I was the enemy of the sanctity of marriage. I scrolled through the comments. The vitriol was overwhelming. I knew she looked trashy. Those leggings were always too tight. We need to run her out of town. Does she teach at the community college? We should get her fired. Someone should post her address so we know where to avoid. And then, someone did. In the comments, a user named ConcernMom99 posted my address, my apartment number, my phone number. My phone started ringing immediately. Unknown number. I stared at it, paralyzed. It stopped, then rang again. Another number. I unplugged my landline. I turned off my cell phone, but the silence did not help. I could feel the hatred radiating from the digital world, penetrating the walls of my apartment. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. A car slowed down as it passed my building. A woman in the passenger seat pointed up at my windows. I jerked the curtains shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. I felt like a hunted animal. This was what Brenda meant by collateral damage. She knew she could not win on the facts. The DNA test was irrefutable, so she decided to burn the battlefield. If Robert was leaving her, she would make sure he looked like a cheater, and she would use me as the scapegoat to garner sympathy. She did not care that she was destroying my life. To her, I was just a prop in her divorce strategy. I sank to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to go online and post the recording. I wanted to shout. She tried to bribe me. She is the liar. But who would believe me? She was Brenda Vance, the philanthropist, the socialite, the grieving mother. I was the broke, single woman who had allegedly seduced a millionaire. The recording proved she offered me money, but she could easily spin that too. She could say she was paying me to leave her husband alone. She could say anything. A rock hit my window. It was a sharp, loud crack that made me scream. I crawled across the floor, staying low, and peeked through the gap in the curtains. There were 3 teenagers standing on the sidewalk. They were laughing. One of them held a carton of eggs. "Home wrecker," one of them shouted. Another egg splattered against the glass, a slimy yellow streak running down the pane. I backed away, retreating into the darkest corner of my apartment. The logic of science could not help me here. There was no hypothesis to test, no data to analyze. This was raw, primal mob mentality. I had underestimated Brenda. I thought she was just a greedy, entitled Karen. I did not realize she was a warlord. I sat in the dark as the sun went down, listening to the occasional shout from the street. I was hungry, but I could not order food. I could not go out. I was a prisoner in my own home. My phone, which I had turned back on just to check the time, lit up with a new email. It was not spam. It was a formal notification from my landlord. Notice to vacate, dear Miss Miller, due to numerous noise complaints and disturbances reported regarding your unit today. We are terminating your lease, effective immediately, under the nuisance clause. You have 3 days to vacate the premises. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Tears finally came. Hot and stinging. I had lost my job. I had lost my reputation. And now, I was losing my home. I looked at the trash can where the torn pieces of the check lay. For a fleeting, agonizing second, I regretted tearing it up. If I was going to be painted as a villain anyway, why hadn't I taken the money? But then, a cold, hard resolve began to crystallize in my chest. It was not the warmth of hope. It was the icy sharpness of hatred. Brenda Vance had taken everything from me. She had stripped me bare and thrown me to the wolves. She thought I would curl up and die. She thought I would run away. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen and retrieved the pieces of the check from the trash. Not to tape them together, but to keep them. I picked up my phone and looked at the recording file. Conversation_Brenda_Vance.m4a. She wanted a villain? Fine, I would be the villain. But not the one she wrote. I would be the one who burned her kingdom to the ground. I was done being the victim. I was done being the polite tutor. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. I looked in the mirror. My eyes were red, my skin pale, but there was something new in my expression. The fear was gone, replaced by a ruthless clarity. I am a scientist, I whispered to my reflection, and I know how to dissect a specimen. I picked up my phone and dialed the number that had called me yesterday. The number for the Four Seasons. Connect me to Robert Vance. I said when the receptionist answered, "Tell him the homewrecker is on the line, and she has evidence he needs to hear." My phone call to the Four Seasons did not result in an immediate audience with Robert Vance. His gatekeepers were formidable. The receptionist was polite but firm, informing me that Mr. Vance was not taking calls. I left a message, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and desperation. But I knew deep down it was just another note on a pile of ignored memos. The next 48 hours were a blur of dismantling my life. Packing is usually a nostalgic act. You find old ticket stubs, forgotten photographs, memories of happier times, but packing under the threat of eviction, while an internet mob bays for your blood, is a trauma. Every object I put into a cardboard box felt like I was burying a piece of myself. My biology textbooks, my collection of dried butterflies, my grandmother's quilt, they all went into the boxes, heavy and dead. On the second day, the legal papers arrived. A process server caught me as I was taking a box of books out to my car. He was a large man with a bored expression, chewing gum loudly. "Joy Miller?" he asked, blocking my path to the driver's side door. I nodded, clutching the box to my chest like a shield. "You have been served," he said, thrusting a thick envelope onto the top of the books. "Have a nice day." He walked away before I could even look at it. I sat in the driver's seat, the rain drumming on the roof, and tore open the envelope. The header was embossed in gold. Law Offices of Davis and Associates. Plaintiff, Brenda Vance. Defendant, Joy Miller. Complaint for damages. Professional negligence. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Alienation of affection. I scanned the document, my eyes widening with horror. The language was brutal. It accused me of maliciously planting false information to destabilize a minor child. It claimed I had engaged in a campaign of harassment against the family. It demanded compensatory damages of $5 million. $5 million. I laughed. It was a hysterical, choking sound. I did not have $500, let alone $5 million. This was not about money. This was about crushing me. This was about making sure I was so buried in legal debt and fear that I would never speak again. The lawyer representing her was named Arthur Davis. I Googled him on my phone right there in the car. His website showed a man with silver hair, a shark-like smile, and a bio that bragged about his ruthless defense of family values and high-net-worth clients. He looked slick. He looked expensive. He looked like the kind of man who enjoyed destroying people for sport. That afternoon, I had my first meeting with him, or rather, a deposition prep, which was just a fancy way of saying an interrogation. Since I could not afford a lawyer, I had to represent myself for now, or risk a default judgment. I drove to his office downtown, a glass tower that scraped the clouds. The conference room was cold, dominated by a long marble table. Davis sat at the head. Brenda was nowhere to be seen. He did not shake my hand. "Miss Miller," he said, not looking up from his file, "you are in a very precarious position." I sat down, placing my recording device, my phone, on the table. "I am recording this," I said, trying to sound brave. Davis chuckled. He leaned back, tenting his fingers. "By all means, record away. It will not help you. The facts are quite clear. You entered the Vance home. You caused a scene. You traumatized a child. And now, you are facing the consequences." "I did not traumatize anyone," I said, my voice shaking. "I taught a science lesson." The child realized the truth, and Brenda offered me $50,000 to lie about it. "I have proof." Davis stopped smiling. He leaned forward, his eyes cold and dead. "Let us be clear about something. Miss Miller, you have a recording of a distraught mother in a moment of extreme vulnerability, trying to protect her son from a predator. That is how a jury will see it. We will paint you as an opportunist who tried to extort her. We will say you demanded the money, and she was simply trying to negotiate to get you to leave her family alone." "That is a lie," I shouted, standing up. "Is it?" Davis asked calmly. "Who do you think they will believe? The grieving mother who runs the charity gala every year, or the broke, single tutor who was fired by 3 other families this week for misconduct?" He slid a piece of paper across the table. "This is a settlement offer. You sign a public apology. You admit you lied about the blood types. You agree to a restraining order. And, in exchange, Mistress Vance drops the lawsuit. No money changes hands. You just walk away." I stared at the paper. It was the same deal Brenda had offered, minus the cash. It was complete surrender. "And if I do not," I whispered, "then I will depose every person you have ever known." Davis said, "I will subpoena your ex-boyfriends, your professors, your landlord. I will drag every skeleton out of your closet and parade it in front of the court. By the time I am done, you will not be able to get a job flipping burgers in this state." I walked out of that office feeling like I had been flayed alive. The air in the city felt thin, insufficient to fill my lungs. I drove back to my apartment to get the last of my things. The sun was setting, casting long, menacing shadows across the street. When I pulled up to the curb, I saw that my landlord had already changed the locks on the front door of the building. My key did not work. I called the superintendent. He told me my remaining boxes had been put on the curb an hour ago. I ran to the side of the building, There, in a soggy pile near the dumpsters, were my boxes. Someone had kicked them over. My books were soaked in puddle water. My grandmother's quilt was trailing in the mud. My dried butterfly collection was crushed. The delicate wings shattered into iridescent dust. I stood there in the rain, looking at the debris of my life. I felt a scream building in my chest, a primal howl of grief and rage, but I swallowed it. I picked up the muddy quilt. I salvaged what books I could. I loaded them into my car until the back seat was full. I had nowhere to go, no family to take me in, no friends who would risk the social stigma of associating with the homewrecker. I drove to a Walmart parking lot on the outskirts of town. I parked in the darkest corner, between an RV and a shopping cart return. I reclined my seat. I locked the doors. I ate a granola bar for dinner. It tasted like sawdust. As I lay there, listening to the hum of the highway and the sound of rain on metal, I felt a profound sense of isolation. I was 27 years old. I was educated. I was hardworking. And I was homeless. All because I refused to lie. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. It buzzed again and again. I finally picked it up. It was a text from an unknown number. Meet me at the diner on 4th and Elm. Midnight. Come alone. Ivry. V. Robert Vance. I sat up, my heart pounding. I looked at the time. It was 11:30. Why now? Why, after days of silence? Was it a trap? Was Brenda luring me there to serve me more papers, or worse? But I looked around at my car, at the fogged-up windows and the pile of wet clothes in the back seat. I had nothing left to lose. If it was a trap, so be it. At least it was something happening. At least it was not this suffocating stillness. I started the engine. It coughed and sputtered before roaring to life. I drove toward the diner, the windshield wipers slapping a rhythm that matched my heartbeat. I was terrified, but beneath the fear, the anger was still there, burning like a pilot light. I was going to meet the man whose wife had ruined my life, and I was bringing my phone, my recording, and my shattered dignity. I pulled into the diner parking lot. It was an old, chrome-plated establishment that looked like it belonged in the 50s. Inside, I could see a solitary figure sitting in a booth near the back. It was Robert. He looked older than I remembered. His shoulders were slumped. He was staring into a cup of black coffee. I took a deep breath, checked that my recording app was ready, and stepped out into the rain. The bell above the diner door jingled with a cheerful, irritating sound that felt entirely out of place for a meeting held at midnight. I stepped inside, shaking the water from my umbrella. Though it was a futile gesture, my coat was already soaked through, heavy and smelling of damp wool. The diner was a relic of a bygone era. All chrome surfaces, red vinyl booths, and a lingering scent of burnt coffee and grease that seemed embedded in the walls. It was nearly empty, save for a truck driver hunched over a plate of eggs at the counter and a waitress who looked like she had been working the night shift since the 1990s. I spotted him immediately. Robert Vance was sitting in the furthest booth, tucked away in the shadows. Even in the dim, fluorescent light, he looked out of place. His suit, though rumpled and devoid of a tie, was cut from Italian silk that probably cost more than the diner's annual revenue. He was staring into a white ceramic mug, his posture radiating a heavy, defeated energy. I walked toward him slowly. My heart was not racing anymore. It was beating with a slow, heavy thud, like a war drum. I had spent the last 48 hours being hunted, evicted, and slandered. I had slept in my car. I had been stripped of my dignity. The fear had burned away, leaving only a cold, hard resolve. I was a scientist walking into a lab to dissect a problem, and Robert Vance was the specimen. I slid into the booth opposite him. The vinyl squeaked beneath me. Robert did not look up immediately. He continued to stare at the black liquid in his cup. His face was gray, the skin sagging around his jawline. He had not shaved in 2 days, and the stubble was silver and rough. He looked like a man who had been hollowed out. "You look terrible," he said, his voice gravelly and low. I laughed. A short, sharp sound devoid of humor. "I am homeless, Mr. Vance. I am sleeping in a Walmart parking lot because your wife decided to burn my life to the ground. Excuse me if I did not have time to freshen up." Robert finally looked up. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with red, but there was a sharpness in them that surprised me. He was drunk, but not obliterated. He was in that dangerous middle ground where alcohol removes inhibitions but leaves the anger intact. "My wife," he repeated, testing the word as if it were poison. "She says you are the reason for all of this. She says you came on to me. She says you planted ideas in the boy's head to break us up." I held his gaze. "Do you believe her?" Robert picked up a spoon and turned it over in his fingers. "I do not know what to believe anymore. I have a paternity test that says the boy I raised for 10 years is a stranger. I have a lawyer telling me to pay you off to make you go away. And I have a wife who is suddenly very concerned about my emotional well-being after ignoring me for a decade." He dropped the spoon. It clattered loudly against the saucer. "Did you sleep with her?" he asked. It was a blunt, ugly question. I felt a flash of rage, but I pushed it down. I needed him to listen, not to fight. "I have met you exactly 1 time before tonight, Mr. Vance. I was hired to teach biology. That is all. I have never been alone with you. I have never spoken to you outside of professional boundaries. The only reason I am here is because I have something you need to hear." I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. The screen was cracked from when I dropped it during my eviction, but it still worked. Robert watched my hand. "What is that?" "Proof," I said. I placed the phone on the table between us. Amidst the sugar packets in the ketchup bottle, I navigated to the voice memo app. I found the file, conversation_Brenda_Vance.m4a. Before I press play, "I want you to understand something," I said, leaning in. "She came to my apartment the night you kicked them out. She was not looking for you. She was looking for me." I pressed the button. The audio quality was surprisingly clear. The sound of rain against my apartment window provided a static backdrop, but Brenda's voice cut through it like a knife. $50,000. Joy, cash, tonight, and another 50,000 when Robert lets us back in. Robert flinched. His eyes widened slightly, focusing on the phone as if it were a living thing. "This is for correcting your mistake. So you Ting Hao Ling 2# is greater than. You are going to sign a sworn affidavit stating that you intentionally misled Kyle. So Jing Hao Ling 2# is greater than. Just sign a paper. Who cares about the truth?" I watched Robert's face as the recording played. I saw the color drain from his cheeks. I saw his jaw clench so hard a muscle feathered in his cheek. He was not hearing a stranger. He was hearing the woman he had shared a bed with, the woman he had trusted with his legacy, calmly negotiating a bribe to cover up a lie. "If you betray me, that check disappears, and I will make sure you end up in prison." The recording ended with the sound of my door slamming. Silence returned to the booth, heavier than before. The waitress walked by with a coffee pot, But upon seeing Robert's face, she wisely decided to keep walking. Robert sat frozen. He looked like a man who had been shot in the gut and was just realizing he was bleeding. "She tried to buy you," he whispered. "She tried to bribe me to commit perjury." I corrected. "She wanted me to say I lied so she could gaslight you into taking her back. When I refused, she launched the smear campaign. She posted my address. She got me evicted. She sued me for $5 million. Robert ran a hand over his face, rubbing his eyes aggressively. "Jesus." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a silver flask. He unscrewed the cap and poured a generous amount into his coffee cup. He did not offer me any. "I knew she was manipulative," he said, his voice shaking. "But this, Saouding 2# is greater than this, is calculated. This is desperate. It is fear. Mr. Vance, she is terrified of losing your money." Robert looked at me then, really looked at me. He saw the exhaustion in my eyes, the wet hair, the cheap clothes. He saw the wreckage his family had caused. "I owe you an apology, Miss Miller," he said. "I do not want an apology." I snapped. "I want my life back. I want the lawsuit dropped. I want my name cleared. And I want to get out of this nightmare." Robert took a long drink of his spiked coffee. He set the mug down with a decisive thud. "You are going to help me destroy her," he stated. I blinked. "Excuse me? You have the recording. That proves she knew about the paternity issue and tried to cover it up. That proves extortion. That proves malice. It is the silver bullet for my divorce proceedings. With that tape, I can cut her off without a cent. No alimony, no settlement, nothing." I stared at him. He was shifting gears. The grieving husband was gone. The ruthless businessman was back. He saw me not as a person, but as an asset, a weapon. "And what do I get?" I asked. Robert leaned forward. "The lawsuit disappears tomorrow. I will have my lawyers, my real lawyers, not the family clowns, file a motion to dismiss. I will pay off your student loans, all of them." My breath hitched. "All of them? Every penny," he said. "And I will pay for your accommodation until you get back on your feet. I will get you an apartment, a nice one, secure." It was a deal with the devil, perhaps, but God. It was a tempting one. To be free of debt, to be safe, but there is a catch, Robert added, his eyes narrowing. "Of course there is. You have to testify. You have to stand up in court, in front of the media, and play that tape. You have to tell the world exactly what she did. It will get ugly. Brenda will fight back. Her lawyer is an animal." "Her lawyer," I repeated, a thought sparking in my mind. "Arthur Davis." Robert nodded. "Davis. He has been the family attorney for 15 years. He handles everything. The trust funds, the real estate, the wills. He is the one representing Brenda in the lawsuit against you." I frowned, my mind racing back to the recording, back to the timeline. "Mr. Vance," I said slowly, piecing together a puzzle I had not realized I was solving. "When did you hire Arthur Davis?" "About 15 years ago," he said. "Why? And Kyle is 10, I said. Robert looked confused. "Yes." "So?" I thought about the way Davis had looked at me in the deposition, the personal vendetta, the way he had spoken about protecting the family with a fervor that went beyond professional duty. And I thought about the genetics. "Brenda is type O," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You are type O. Kyle is type A. That means his biological father must have either type A or type AB blood." Robert waved his hand dismissively. I do not care who the father is. Some pool boy, some tennis instructor. It does not matter. It matters if you want to know who helped her. I said, Mr. Vance, think about it. Brenda is not smart enough to pull off a trust fund fraud for 10 years without legal help. She does not know how to set up the accounts. She does not know how to hide the paper trail. Someone helped her. Someone on the inside. Robert went still. His eyes lost focus, staring past me at the rain-streaked window. Davis, he muttered. Davis set up the trust for Kyle. He structured it so that the boy gets access to $20 million on his 18th birthday, regardless of my marital status to Brenda. I leaned in. And who controls the trust until then? The trustee. Robert said, Davis. The silence that followed was suffocating. The realization hung in the air between us like thick smoke. It was not just an affair. It was a heist. A long con. A decade-long robbery disguised as a family. Robert's face turned a color I had never seen on a living human being. It was a mix of purple and ash gray. The veins in his neck bulged. If you are right, he whispered, his voice trembling with a rage so profound it sounded like calm. Then Davis is not just her lawyer, he is her partner. And maybe, I added softly, he is the father. Robert stood up. He did not slide out of the booth. He exploded out of it. He grabbed his coat. His movements jerky and violent. We need to go, he said. Saotsing Haoling, 2# is greater than where? My office. I need to see the files. I need to see the birth certificate. I need to see everything Davis has ever touched. He threw a $100 bill onto the table, far more than the cost of 2 coffees. Come on, Joy, he commanded. You wanted to be a scientist? Tonight you are going to be a forensic accountant. I scrambled to grab my phone and my umbrella. I followed him out into the rain. The wind had picked up, howling through the streets of the city. As I walked toward his sleek black car, leaving my battered sedan behind in the diner lot, I felt a shift in the universe. I was no longer the prey. I was no longer the victim cowering in the dark. I was sitting in the passenger seat of a luxury car next to a man who possessed the power to level mountains, and I had just handed him the coordinates for the airstrike. But as I looked at Robert's profile, illuminated by the dashboard lights, I saw a man on the edge of sanity. He was gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather creaked. He was not driving toward justice. He was driving toward revenge, and I was in the car with him. Buckle up, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. I clicked the seatbelt into place. The engine roared to life, a deep, guttural growl that vibrated through my spine. We pulled out onto the empty street, the tires hissing on the wet asphalt. I looked out the window at the passing city lights, blurring into streaks of gold and red. I thought about Kyle, the innocent boy caught in the middle of this war. I thought about the biology lesson that started it all. Information is just data. I had told myself, but I was wrong. Information is ammunition, and tonight we were going to war. The headquarters of Vance Enterprises was a monolith of black glass piercing the rainy skyline of Seattle. At 2 o'clock in the morning, the building was a silent tomb of commerce. I followed Robert Vance through the revolving doors, the squeak of my wet sneakers on the polished marble floor echoing like gunshots in a canyon. The security guard at the desk, a man with a thick neck and tired eyes, started to stand up, his hand reaching for his belt. Then he saw Robert. He saw the wild look in the CEO's eyes, the disheveled hair, and the way he marched toward the elevators like a soldier storming a beach. The guard sat back down, making himself small. He did not ask for my identification. He did not ask why a woman looking like a drowned rat was trailing his boss. He just pressed the button to unlock the elevators. We rode up to the 45th floor in silence. My ears popped as we ascended. I watched Robert's reflection in the brushed steel doors. He was vibrating with a terrifying energy. It was not adrenaline. It was the cold, fusion-powered engine of hatred. When the doors opened, we stepped into a sprawling, open-plan office that smelled of ozone and carpet cleaner. Robert did not stop. He walked straight to a heavy oak door at the end of the hall, swipe-keyed his badge, and shoved it open. This was his sanctuary, a corner office with a panoramic view of the city he helped build. But tonight, he treated it like a crime scene. He went straight to a wall, safe, hidden behind a generic, abstract painting. His fingers flew over the keypad. Beep, 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 clack. The heavy door swung open. He pulled out a stack of leather-bound folders and slammed them onto his massive desk. "Start reading," he commanded. I approached the desk tentatively. "What am I looking for?" "The money," Robert said, pouring himself another drink from a crystal decanter on the sidebar. "Follow the money. Look at the trust fund documents. Look at the dates." I opened the first folder. It was dense with legalese. Pages upon pages of clauses and stipulations regarding the Kyle Vance irrevocable trust. My eyes scanned the lines, my brain switching from biologist to analyst. I saw the numbers. $20 million to be released to the beneficiary upon his 18th birthday. And then I saw the clause, in the event of the dissolution of marriage between Robert Vance and Brenda Vance, or in the event of Robert Vance's death or incapacitation, the role of primary trustee shall bypass the biological mother and be appointed to the family legal counsel, Arthur Davis, until the beneficiary reaches the age of majority. I froze. I read it again. "Mr. Vance," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Did you read paragraph 4, section C?" Robert did not look up from the file he was shredding with his eyes. "I signed it 10 years ago. Davis told me it was a standard protection clause to keep the money safe from Brenda if she ever went crazy. He said it was to protect me." I looked at the paper. "It does not protect you. It cuts you out. If you divorce Brenda, you lose control of the money. Davis takes over. He controls the $20 million for the next 8 years. He can invest it, leverage it, take fees from it." Robert let out a laugh that sounded like glass breaking in a disposal. "He played the long game," Robert said. He knew Brenda was going to leave me eventually. Or maybe they planned to kill me off. Who knows? He threw another file at me. It slid across the mahogany surface. "Look at the medical records," he said. I opened the second file. It was a personnel file for Arthur Davis. As the company's chief legal officer, his records were kept in-house. I flipped past the resume, past the tax forms, until I found the company health insurance application. There it was, blood type, a positive. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I looked at Robert. He was standing by the window, his forehead pressed against the cold glass, looking down at the city. "Type A." I said, "Brenda is type O." Robert said to the window, "I am type O. Davis is type A." He turned around. His face was a mask of tragedy. I introduced them. He whispered, 15 years ago, I brought him home for dinner. I told Brenda, "This is Arthur. He is the smartest man I know. He will take care of us." He walked over to the desk and picked up a framed photograph. It was a picture taken at a company picnic maybe 5 years ago. It showed Robert, Brenda, Kyle, and Arthur Davis standing together. Robert was laughing, looking at the camera, but Brenda was looking at Davis, and Davis was looking at Kyle. I looked closer at the photo. I looked at Kyle's eyes. They were not Robert's eyes. They were not Brenda's eyes. They were the hooded, sharp eyes of Arthur Davis. It was right there. I said, the whole time, it was right in front of your face. Biology does not lie. Robert quoted me, his voice dripping with bitterness. He suddenly smashed the picture frame against the edge of the desk. The glass shattered, spraying shards across the room. I flinched. Stepping back, he pulled the photo out of the wreckage and stared at it. He is my best friend, Robert said, his voice cracking. He is the godfather of my son. We play golf every Sunday. I trusted him with my life. I trusted him with my will, and he has been sleeping with your wife for a decade. I said, knowing I had to be brutal. I had to make sure he understood the enemy we were fighting. He fathered your child. He set up a trust fund so he could spend your money. And when the truth came out, he tried to destroy me to keep his secret. Robert dropped the photo. It fluttered to the floor, landing face up. He walked over to his chair and sat down heavily. He looked small in the leather throne. What do we do? He asked. He sounded like a child asking a parent for guidance. I took a deep breath. I thought about the 300 hateful comments on my social media. I thought about the eggs thrown at my window. I thought about the eviction notice. We burn them. I said. I pulled out my phone. We do not just go to court. Robert, court is quiet. Court is sealed records and settlements. You want revenge? We go public. Robert looked at me. How? You release a statement. I said, my mind racing. You release the DNA test results. You release the recording of Brenda trying to bribe me. And you release the proof that Davis is the father. You send it to every news outlet in Seattle. You send it to the Bar Association. You send it to the partners at his law firm. But the scandal, Saoting Haoling, 2# is greater than Robert began. It will destroy the company's stock. It will humiliate me. I walked around the desk and stood in front of him. Mr. Vance, you are already humiliated. They made a fool of you for 10 years. The only way to get your dignity back is to show the world that you are the one holding the sword, not the one taking the knife in the back. Robert looked at me for a long, agonizing minute. He saw the fire in my eyes. He saw the ruthlessness that poverty and injustice had forged in me. He reached for the desk phone. He dialed a number. This is Robert Vance, he said into the receiver. Wake up the public relations team. Yes, all of them. I do not care what time it is. Get them to the office. We are issuing a press release at 6 o'clock in the morning. He hung up. He looked at me. You are going to write it, he said. Saoting Haoling. To me, you are the writer. You are the teacher. You tell the story. Joy. Make sure they understand exactly what happened. I sat down at his computer. I opened a blank document. The cursor blinked at me, a rhythmic pulse of opportunity. I began to type. I did not write like a tutor. I wrote like a prosecutor. I laid out the facts, the blood types, the bribe, the timeline, the trust fund. I wove the narrative together, stripping away the veneer of the perfect Vance family to reveal the rotting core beneath. By the time the sun began to rise over the city, painting the sky in hues of blood orange and bruised purple, the statement was ready. Robert read it. He did not change a word. Send it, he said. Saoting Haoling. 2 Rauta ist größer als I hit. Send. The fallout was immediate and nuclear. Within an hour, my phone began to buzz. But this time, it was not hate mail. It was reporters. It was producers from morning talk shows. By noon, the story was trending nationwide. Billionaire cuckolded by best friend and lawyer. Na shocker, the $10 million secret. Tutor vindicated. Hero or whistleblower. I stood by the window of Robert's office, looking down at the street. News vans were already swarming the entrance of the building. I saw a black sedan pull up. I saw Arthur Davis step out, surrounded by reporters. He looked pale. He looked terrified. For the first time in his life, he was not in control. I turned to Robert. He was watching the television on the wall. They were playing the recording of Brenda. Her voice, shrill and desperate, filled the room. Just sign a paper. Who cares about the truth? Robert took a sip of his coffee. He looked at me. You were right. Joy, he said softly. The truth is a biological law. It always comes out. But as I looked at his face, I did not see relief. I saw a man who had cut out his own heart to save his pride. And as I looked at myself in the reflection of the glass, I realized I was no longer the innocent woman who just wanted to teach science. I was the executioner, and I liked it. The apartment Robert Vance secured for me was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the Sound. It was beautiful, sterile, and cold. It smelled of lemon polish and emptiness. I sat on the beige sofa, staring at the panoramic view of the city lights reflecting off the black water. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. I had not slept in 24 hours. The news cycle was still churning. My phone, which sat on the coffee table like a radioactive isotope, was vibrating every few seconds with notifications. The press release had detonated. Arthur Davis had been suspended from his firm pending an investigation. The police had opened a file on the fraud allegations regarding the trust fund. Robert had publicly filed for divorce and disinheritance. I should have felt triumphant. I had won. I had taken down the Goliath who tried to crush me. But as I sat there in the silence of that borrowed luxury, I did not feel like a winner. I felt like a bait animal tied to a stake, waiting for the predator to make one last, desperate lunge. I knew Brenda Vance. I knew her psychological profile. I had seen it in the way she manipulated her son, in the way she tried to bribe me, in the way she had orchestrated a decade-long lie with sociopathic precision. Women like Brenda do not surrender. When you back a narcissist into a corner, they do not negotiate, they annihilate. Robert had assured me the building was secure. There was a doorman. There were cameras. There was a patrol car parked down the street. But fear is a primal instinct, older than security systems. The hairs on the back of my arms were standing up. I heard a sound. It was faint. A soft metallic click, like a key turning in a lock. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I looked at the heavy front door. It was deadbolted. I had checked it 3 times. The handle turned slowly. I stood up, my socks sliding on the polished hardwood floor. I looked around for a weapon. A lamp? A kitchen knife? The door swung open. It was not forced. It was unlocked. Brenda stepped into the apartment. She did not look like the socialite I had met weeks ago. She looked like a banshee. Her blonde hair was matted and wild, sticking up in tufts. She was wearing black yoga pants and a dark hoodie that was too large for her. Her face was gaunt, the skin pulled tight over her cheekbones, and her eyes were wide, glittering with a manic, terrifying light. She held a key card in her left hand, a master key, probably stolen or bought. In her right hand, she held a gun. It was a small, silver pistol. It looked almost like a toy, but the bore was dark and very real. "Hello, Joy," she whispered. Her voice was raspy, as if she had been screaming for hours. I took a step back, raising my hands. "Brenda, put the gun down. The police are outside." She laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound. "The police are busy watching Robert's house. They think I am there, crying in my bedroom. But I am not there, am I?" She kicked the door shut behind her. The latch clicked, echoing in the silent apartment. "You ruined everything," she said, walking toward me. She moved with a strange, yerky gait. "You took my money. You took my reputation. You took my son." "I did not take anything," I said, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to remain calm. "You did this. You lied. Lies are just stories we tell to survive." She screamed, the sudden volume making me flinch. "I did what I had to do. I secured a future for my child. Robert never loved Kyle. He never looked at him. I gave that boy a father, even if it was a lie. And you, Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than you, nobody. Sao Yu Jing Hao Ling, 2# is greater than you destroyed it because of a biology lesson?" She raised the gun, pointing it at my chest. "I am going to fix it," she said, my voice dropping back to a whisper. "You cannot fix this, Brenda. It is over." "No, it is not," she smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression I had ever seen. "I am going to kill you, Joy, and then I am going to put this gun in your hand, and everyone will say, 'Oh, the poor tutor.'" The pressure was too much. She could not handle the scandal. She killed herself out of guilt. She took another step, and then Robert will be the villain again, the man who drove a young woman to suicide. The investigation will stall. I will play the grieving victim again. I will win. She was insane. The logic was fractured, delusional, but in her mind, it was a perfect plan. She was going to execute me to rewrite the narrative. I looked around. I was 5 feet away from the kitchen island. On the counter was a heavy marble mortar and pestle. Brenda cocked the hammer of the gun. The click was deafening. "Say goodbye, Joy." I did not think. I reacted. I lunged to the side just as the gun went off. The sound was like a cannon blast in the enclosed space. I felt the wind of the bullet pass my ear. It shattered the sliding glass door behind me, raining shards of safety glass onto the balcony. I scrambled toward the kitchen. Brenda screamed in frustration and fired again. The bullet hit the granite countertop, sending stone chips flying into my face. I grabbed the heavy marble pestle. I turned just as Brenda charged at me. She was not shooting anymore. She was closing the distance, intent on finishing it with her hands. She crashed into me, and we both went down hard onto the floor. She was strong. Hysterical strength is real. Her hands were around my throat instantly, squeezing with a grip that felt like iron bands. Her fingernails dug into my skin. I gagged, my vision spotting with white lights. I could smell her. She smelled of stale wine, sweat, and gunpowder. "Dee," she shrieked, spittle flying onto my face. "Dee, you little witch." I could not breathe. My lungs burned. The world was narrowing down to a tunnel with her hateful, contorted face at the center. I swung the marble pestle with the last ounce of strength I had. It connected with the side of her head with a sickening thud. Brenda's grip loosened. Her eyes rolled back for a second. I shoved her off me and scrambled backward, gasping for air. I coughed, my throat raw and burning. Brenda shook her head. dazed but not out. Blood was trickling down her temple. She looked at me. Then she looked at the gun lying on the floor between us. We both lunged for it. My hand touched the cold metal first, but she grabbed my wrist. We wrestled for the weapon, sliding on the polished floor. She was biting my arm, scratching at my eyes. She was an animal fighting for its life. "Let go," I screamed, kicking at her. The gun skittered away across the floor. Sliding under the sofa, Brenda let out a howl of rage. She grabbed a handful of my hair and slammed my head against the floorboards. Pain exploded in my skull, just as she raised her fist to strike again. The front door exploded inward. This time, it was not a key. It was a battering ram. "Police, drop it, get on the ground." Men in tactical gear swarmed the room. The lights from their rifles cut through the gloom, blinding me. Brenda froze. She looked at the door. She looked at me. For a second, I thought she would attack the police. Instead, she collapsed. She did not faint. She just folded in on herself, curling into a ball on the floor, and began to sob. It was a high, keen wail of a child who has had a toy taken away. "Officer," I choked out, holding my hands up. "She broke in. She tried to kill me." 2 officers pulled Brenda up. She went limp, dead weight in their arms. As they dragged her past me, her head lolled to the side. She looked at me one last time. The rage was gone, replaced by a hollow, vacant stare. "My money," she whispered. "My money." I watched them handcuff her. I watched them bag the gun. I watched the paramedics rush in to check my head. I sat on the floor, leaning against the kitchen island, shivering uncontrollably. My throat throbbed where her hands had been. My apartment, my safe house, was a wreck of shattered glass and blood. My phone, which had fallen under the table during the fight, buzzed again. I reached for it with trembling fingers. It was a text from Robert. "Are you safe? The police said they have her." I typed back, my thumb struggling to hit the keys. "I am alive." I looked at the shattered window. The cold night air was rushing in, chilling the sweat on my skin. I was alive. I had survived the lesson. I had survived the lawsuit. I had survived the assassination attempt. But as the adrenaline faded, leaving a dark, gaping hole in my stomach, I realized that survival was not the same as winning. I looked at the blood on my hands, Brenda's blood, mixed with my own. I closed my eyes and listened to the sirens wailing in the distance, carrying the monster away. But the silence she left behind was louder than the gunshots. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of a beach house in Santa Barbara, watching the Pacific Ocean churn against the sand. The sun was blindingly bright, a stark contrast to the eternal gray drizzle of Seattle. I held a glass of iced tea in my hand, the condensation dripping down my fingers. I was safe. I was anonymous. And as of 9 o'clock this morning, I was a millionaire. The notification from the bank had been silent. Just a simple vibration in my pocket. Wire transfer received. $2,500,000. It was the settlement. Robert Vance called it a token of gratitude for saving his fortune. His lawyers called it a non-disclosure agreement and compensation for emotional distress. I called it blood money. The trial had been a circus. I watched it from the safety of a hotel room, refusing to attend in person after my initial testimony. Brenda Vance did not look like a queen anymore, stripped of her designer clothes and her hair dye, sitting in a drab orange jumpsuit. She looked like what she really was, a frightened, aging woman who had gambled everything on a lie and lost. She and Arthur Davis had turned on each other with the ferocity of starving rats. Davis claimed Brenda masterminded the fraud. Brenda claimed Davis used his legal authority to manipulate her. The jury did not care about their finger pointing. The DNA evidence, the trust fund documents, and the recording of the bribe were damning. They were both sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for fraud, conspiracy, and in Brenda's case, attempted murder. Justice was served. The newspapers said the evil stepmother was locked away. The wicked lawyer was disbarred and disgraced. The hero walked away with a check, but there was one loose thread that the newspapers buried on page 6. Xiaoyu Jinghao Ling, 2# is greater than Kyle. I thought about him every day. I thought about the last time I saw him. It was the day after the shooting. Robert had summoned Child Protective Services to the estate. I had been there to sign some papers with the police. I watched from the hallway as the social worker, a weary woman with a clipboard, packed Kyle's clothes into black garbage bags. Robert stood by the fireplace, drinking scotch. He did not look at the boy. He is not my son, Robert had said coldly when the social worker asked if there were any family members who could take him. I have no obligation to him. He is living evidence of a crime committed against me. I want him gone. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him. I wanted to tell him that you cannot just delete 10 years of fatherhood because the genetics do not match. But I said nothing. I was paralyzed by my own trauma, by the stitches in my head, by the sheer weight of the tragedy. Kyle walked out of that house alone. He did not cry. He did not look back at the man he had called Dad for a decade. He looked at me. His eyes were empty. They were the eyes of a child who had learned the hardest lesson of all, that love is conditional and that adults are liars. He entered the foster care system, a 10-year-old boy with a trust fund he could not touch and a family name that was now a curse. I took a sip of my tea, the ice clinking against the glass. The sea breeze felt cold despite the sun. I walked back inside my beautiful, expensive rental home. I opened my laptop and logged into the student loan portal. I typed in the full balance, $120,000. I clicked pay. The balance turned to 0. The chains that had bound me since I was 18 were gone. I was free. I could go back to school. I could travel. I could do anything I wanted. But as I stared at the screen, I did not feel the elation I had always imagined. I felt hollow. I felt dirty. I closed the laptop. I walked to the mirror in the hallway and looked at my reflection. The bruise on my neck had faded to a faint yellow shadow. The scar on my hairline was hidden by my bangs. I looked normal. I looked like a successful young woman on vacation. But I knew the truth. I was the one who lit the match. I was the one who insisted on the science. I was the one who valued accuracy over peace. I picked up a biology textbook from the coffee table, the only book I had saved from my old life. I opened it to the chapter on blood types. I looked at the Punnett square. O plus O equals O. It is a simple equation. It is a fundamental truth of nature. It cannot be negotiated. It cannot be bribed. I traced the lines with my finger. The truth is supposed to set you free. That is what they tell us. They tell us that honesty is the highest virtue, but they do not tell you about the blast radius. They do not tell you that sometimes a lie is the only thing holding a roof over a child's head. I closed the book and placed it on the table. I have my money. Brenda has her cell. Robert has his pride. And Kyle has nothing. I walked out onto the balcony again, turning my face to the sun, trying to burn away the chill in my bones. I had taught the world a lesson in genetics, but the world had taught me a lesson in cruelty. I am Joy Miller. I am debt-free. I am a millionaire, and I will never teach another child again.